Let's discuss about some details about the Open Up project life cycle, which is based on the iterative incremental life cycle. Okay, and the detailed picture you can see below, uh, which is proper application of this life cycle directly address the first core principle. Okay, it is linked with that yeah, inception, elaboration, construction, transition. Those are the four principles what we discuss here. Now, inception, I mean, easy to keep in mind. That is the phase where people define the problem. So then, in the second phase, elaboration, they validate the proposed solution architecture. Third level, they start building and verify the solution in increments. And finally, to transition the solution to the operational environment and validate the solution. So that is the kind of the way how this project life cycle could be visualized. So if we go a little bit in detail about these four uh, phases which we define in Open Up life cycle. The first one was iteration. Uh, that is the Open Up iteration. That is, if you can remember, the second layer, team focus. Okay, phase are further decomposed into a number of iterations. So the picture which you saw earlier was the big picture, but when it comes to the team which is working on that one, they at each iteration a verified build of the system increment is available. So that's the what they want to do. So each iteration has its own life cycle, beginning with the planning, ending within a stable system increment. Iteration review. Did we achieve the iteration objectives? And retrospective. Is there a better process? So the picture shows here. So as you can see, iteration planning. Okay, a few hours, a few days, upfront planning and architecture, so where the people spend. So then the gradually, as you can, continuous micro increments, bug fix and build. So there are several things. Stable weekly build, people work on that. So these builds are the outcome of each phase. And then stable iteration build. Okay, iteration review and retrospective, continuous bug fixing and micro increments builds. So here it is shown. So it's the kind of the way the progress on completion of the micro increments is monitored daily via scrums and the iteration burn down chart to provide the timely feedback. So as you can see here. So if we go to the individual focus, so micro increments are small steps towards the goals iteration. So it's a 1 or 2 days work and should be small enough. And identify the stakeholders in a micro increment. Okay, one step of a task. So determine technical approach for persistency is in a micro increment, a task with a specific focus. So usually what happens when people got a problem, they spend weeks trying to solve a small thing. So that's that then the whole plan goes away from the what they want to achieve. So always very short period, 1 to 2 days. If they can't solve it within the 2 days, get a help or put it aside and move to other things. So micro increments are identified and tracked via the work items list. So work items must be produced, and that's the list is very important. So if you look at the whole picture from the project management point of view, the work breakdown structure, and the main key things what we really wanted to see with respect to the each four phases as described: inception, elaboration, life cycle, construction, and the transition. Those are the four things. So within the each one, as you can see here, the templates are defined. So it's a much more easier if anyone wants to adapt and follow the open up. All these documentations are available. And if we go a little bit in detail about the inception phase, so what really happens with respect to these templates and the documents, where the primary purpose is the inception is to understand the scope of the problem and the feasibility of the solution. So at the end, the people may decide not to do the project. That's also possible, but that's very, very important. So in that case, the several uh, phases, as you can see, and corresponding activities are given here. So this diagram shows the visually how it works. So the first thing people call it as a define the vision. So it's initiate the project, and that's what people do here. So usually there is a set of templates, and when you define the vision, there are objectives, and you may also identify the what is based on these goals and the objectives you will further expand to identify the scope. Okay, and at the same time, when you do that one and you come to that one, identify the key system functionalities. Okay, so based on the objectives, identify refined requirements. So this is another thing. So once they define a vision, they start going further, and at the same time there's a parallel work, agree on the technical approach. How do we do that? Okay, what sort of an overall approach that we do. So when this activity goes on in parallel, people can plan and manage the iteration, understand the cost, schedule, and the risk associated with the project. So initial cost estimation will be done based on all these things, you know. So this visual representation, what really happens, and all of you should download the Eclipse process framework, from which you can get all the documentation and the templates and everything for unified process. That can be easily downloaded. The present version, if I remember, 1.5 plus something, and do this one. So then we will get a clear. So if we go to the next one, about the open up life cycle, second phase is elaboration phase. So where we want the primary focus is to validate the solution architecture. Okay, now if we have decided to do the project, the next thing will be, okay, how do we do it, and what is the thing. So feasibility and trade-offs will be further analyzed. Still it is possible people could decide to stop or terminate the project if it is not going to possible. So here the detailed activities are conducted, where as you can see, the phase objectives and the corresponding activities and the visual representation here, where get a more detailed understanding of the requirements. So that is the one. So then identify and refine the requirements. So this is a continuation of what is from the previous one. So they continue from top to down. And then design, implement, validate the baseline architecture, the most important one. Develop the architecture. So they will have to finish this one before they go to the next phase and develop the architecture, develop the solution increment and the test solution. So when the architecture comes to the very abstract level, people may think about these are the increments they want and how they are going to test those things. And the same time mitigate the essential risks and the produce accurate schedule and the cost estimate. So uh, the client negotiation will happen most probably once they know this part, plan and manage the iteration ongoing task, and once this phase is completed, uh, that the team could move forward. And the actual work happens in the construction phase, where the development work starts, and as you can see here, um, there are objectives and which is phases are here. Iteratively develop a complete product that is ready to transition the user community. So again, identify and refine requirements. That will continue here. The refining the requirements, they may identify new things and develop the solution increment and test solution more several time iterations. They may plan on this one, develop the solution increment, minimize the development cost, and achieve some degree of parallelism. So that is the very tough thing, and therefore the plan and manage the iteration while the getting the maximum within the given set of constraints. So the last phase, if once the solution is developed, is to purpose of a transition phase is to deploy the solution to the operational environment and validate it. And in that case, you can see the objectives and the activities. Yeah, beta test to validate that the user expectations are met. So where ongoing tasks, develop solution increment test solutions correspond to those two things. So these two things, as you can see, which is done in parallel. Achieve stakeholder concurrence, that deployment is complete, plan and manage iteration, and that is yeah, while testing and they do it, they develop it and improve the future project performance through lessons learned, plan and manage the iteration. So the project completion happens there, and very important. But before they move into the maintenance level, this is what the people will have to do it. Okay, open up disciplines. There are 6 disciplines which are defined in the open up, as you can see here. Discipline could be considered as a collection of tasks that is in a kind of in a major area of a concern within the project. So these major areas of concerns are active throughout the project. So within the life cycle, these tasks are performed concurrently. So they are not one after another. So in several disciplines, that's what I say, they are active throughout the project. Separate tasks into distinct disciplines is simply an effective way to organize the content that makes comprehension easier. Okay, so you will see the details how these things happen. Now, before I try to describe the details about these disciplines, would like to give a general statement about the way how things are happened across all these disciplines. People who involved in the project have roles and they perform tasks. As a result of these tasks, people produce some artifacts. Okay, this is what happens everywhere. For example, at the moment, I perform as a teacher. My role is a teacher. I perform a task of teaching. As a result, this video lecture is produced. So this is what happens in every context. And in the open up describes the minimum set of roles required and the tasks that should be performed by these people and what are the artifacts. And they are considered considering the software development context. So in the rest of the slides, we described what are these roles and what are the tasks performed by these people and the work products or the artifacts that will be produced as a result. So any process, if we want to discuss, there are set of elements. So the first one are the roles, then the work product, what is produced, and the task, how to perform the work. Process. So the process is to define the work breakdown and a workflow by combining the role, work, product and task most of the time. And then the guidance, which will help the people to follow template, checklists, example, guidance and so on. So these basic elements are the kind of a building blocks from which the process are composed. So let's identify the roles which are defined in the Open UP. Uh, so and essential skills of the participants are defined as a method element with respect to these roles. First one, well, of course, most important person, group, stakeholders, and stakeholder group role represent the whose requirement to be satisfied. So we have to do everything to make these people happy and successful. Analyst is the second role who gathers the requirements from the first role, the stakeholders, first to understand the problem to be solved, then capture and setting priorities of the requirements. So it's very important what he do. He has to interact with the other role and define the problem, understand the problem first and then define it, and also identify the other things which are associated with these things. Then the third, which I would say a boss of the project, architect, and his role is in a very important, and he designed the software architecture, so which is a kind of a key technical decision that constrains the overall design and constraints. The developer is the other role, which has in a small team, most probably who develop the system. Developing a part of the system, maybe a one person designing it to fit to the architecture, implementing, unit testing, integration. These are the things associated with the tester. Identifying, defining, implementing, conducting, logging results and analysis of the test results. So that is also a very important role which does, because several aspects has to be tested. Project manager. Well, we need someone here. Planning the project by interacting with the stakeholders and coordinating team to achieve objectives. Very, very important. And there is another interesting role, any role, I mean, who does all these clerical work, okay, general and clerical tasks, but that's a very, very important. They play a very intermediate role by supporting all other roles, okay. They don't have a kind of a thing, sometimes like karya bharayak nathi, okay, we call it in Sinhala, but it doesn't undermine. Their role is also very important. So if we install the um, EPF and you will access the wiki of the Openup, you will see all these details you can find. And where in the analysis role, as you can see, analyst perform two things: performs and responsible. Performs three things. Here he defined the vision, detail requirements, find and outline the requirements. So when he does, these things are produced. He is responsible for these artifacts. Okay, glossary supporting specification. So if you click it, you will see the details, and also he performs additional things. Okay, and also may modify these artifacts and process usage, how it works. So it's very important to browse this wiki and see how things are performed. Then, of course, when you conduct that project, that's some sort of things to do it. So here, the person who helps others, okay, his role. So he follows the request for change, assess the results, manage iteration, things like that. Then architect, well, he performs main two things: outline the architecture, refine the architecture. So the artifact work product is the architecture notebook. Okay, so his additional things, what he modifies, and the process are described. So responsible for defining the software architecture, which includes making the key technical decision that constrains the overall design and implementation of the project. Then this role is responsible for developing a part of the system, the developer, including the designing to fit the architecture, possibly prototyping the user interface, then implementing, unit testing, integrating component that are part of the solution. So you can see he has to perform several things. 5 things are identified: design the solution, implement the developer test, implement the solution, integrated, created, built, and the run test. So here are the artifacts where he is responsible for. Additional works are given here. When we move to the other one is the project manager role. So these are the things where he performs: assess the results, manage iteration, plan iteration, project plan. And again, the 4 artifacts he is responsible. So then he leads the planning of the project, coordinate the interaction with the stakeholders, and keep the project team focused on meeting the project objectives. So the man who manages the others to get the work done. Stakeholder role, the, the person to whom we develop the things, represent the interest group. It's not a one person. Several needs must be satisfied the project. It is a role that may be played by anyone whose potential will be materially affected by the outcome of the project. Okay. So these are the activities. So there is he's not responsible for any of the artifacts and he doesn't perform, but we interact with him. But he may perform these things, and the process usage is described here. Tester, as we identified, has 3 performs: create the test case, implement the test scripts, and the run test. And then as a result, 3 artifacts for which he is responsible. So core activities of the test effort is his responsibility. Activities include identifying, defining, implementing, and conducting necessary tests. And additional performs, modifies, process usages are defined here.